into, which is probably to say I was something I wouldn't, if somebody had said that I was going to do this thing, right, you know, I just never would. I'd never taken ecstasy. I didn't look good in hot pants. I didn't want to dance on a podium. That's what I thought it would involve, but that's not what happened. Anybody who understands how these therapies work. But one of the things that it did, it gifted me many things, but it also gifted me unexpectedly some insights into my professional life, which is about the essential nature of human connection, of deep human connection, of even just a few sustaining reciprocal relationships where one can feel safe, where one can feel trusted. The connection to nature, to have access to the natural world. In the work that I was doing during COVID, there was a substantial difference between the mental health of people who had access to outdoor, safe access to outdoor space, and those who didn't. And while we are not building every single new building, every single city, with that implicit into it, that is not something that people with backyards or people who live in green, leafy suburbs should only have access to. It is critical. And what did I learn from this? What did I learn professionally? I learned a lot personally from this. What did I learn professionally? That connection is not a luxury. It's not the soft part of mental health. It's the core. Without it, intergenerational trauma festers. With it, healing becomes possible. And that's as true for a traumatised individual as it is for a nation in crisis. And for our political leaders, who, because of the nature of in many ways, tell you what, is this being recorded? No. Anybody ever gone into Parliament House? And anybody's ever done any work on trauma? It's the concentration feeling of a whole lot of people who haven't dealt with their past year. It's just so, it is like, these people are leading the country, they are just, it's so bad. I mean, I once joked that we should just put a little bit of MDMA in the water in Parliament House and see what comes out, but maybe we don't need to do that. But really, it does, we think that these things are disconnected. We think that people's personal experience with complex trauma doesn't find its way into the decisions they make and therefore flow into the decisions they make about our country. So I would say that in the midst of this overwhelming evidence that we're in a polycrisis, what do we do? And it's that call to connection. Buffeted by economic inequality, technological disruption, a culture of suspicion around our democratic institutions, climate grief, and post-pandemic scars. But at the same time, it is a society longing for connection, justice, and care. So what do we do in this moment? For some of us, and there's no doubt about it, without the tools, without the resources, without the leadership, they are stocking up on canned goods, they are marching in the streets against immigrants, they are yearning for a past Australia that never existed. For so many people, including I'm sure people in this room, they are choosing leadership that builds trust, deepens belonging and offers hope, which means listening more than speaking. And it's one of the great things about my job, and one of the great gifts of it, is that a big part of social research is shutting up and not asking questions. It's like, how's your life? What's it like? And just listening, deep listening without judgment. I would say that's the greatest gift of the work that I've done. How do we build organisations, projects, systems that connect diverse groups and facilitate that kind of social connection that builds capital? And how do we make sure this is all grounded in lived experience and not abstractions, not theory? The whole conference starts up with that first day of people with lived experience talking about the things that matter. So one final thing I wanted to talk about before there's questions, there's lots of opportunity for questions, is I've researched mental health over my 20 years of research, but on and off, but I've got a particular interest in it now. And in October this year, I'm releasing a new piece of research called Mental Health Compass. This is fifth compass I've done. A compass is basically an audience segmentation. The first one I did was on climate, and the second one was on gender equality. It's a very large survey that what it does is it segments or breaks Australia up into different archetypes or groups, largely based on values and mindset, but sometimes on behaviour as well. What this compass that's been funded by Australians for Mental Health is going to do is make in a kind of a comprehensive and ethical way, but more about how they feel about the social determinants of mental health and what they think the system needs. And whether they think mental health, whether they see it in terms of a very narrow clinical individual way, or whether they see it as something that is, it serves much more to think about it at a societal, economic, social and cultural way, and as not just something that people have over there, but something that which exists for all of us and is going to be solved by all of us working together. So I'm really, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see when that research is released, and it's a detailed piece of work that we want everybody in the sector to have access to, because often is part of it. Hopefully another one of mine, along with a book, a contribution to a sector that is doing so much, often with so little, to make sure that Australia is not just a prosperous country, but a happy one as well. Thank you.
And given that we were talking about Italian connections.
Yeah.
Okay, fascism leads to horrible practices to many minorities, but it created revolutionary changes for things like housing, e.g. Mussolini, and employment. Can we harness these conditions for positive change, positive outcomes?
So, the conditions of fascism for positive outcomes?
Yeah, something.
Look, I think there's a lot in that, okay? So I think the seductive and in some ways justifiable allure of authoritarianism is that it seems like there's problems and we just need often a strong man, but not always a strong man, to just come in and make the decisions and then do the stuff and get rid of the messy, divisions and the red tape and the green tape and all the rest of it, and just do it. And it is true that authoritarian cultures can get certain things done very quickly. So, for example, in China, the energy transition is just galloping ahead because they just build whatever they want over the communities that are there. If they want to build a transition line over a village or over a sacred site or any of that, they'll just do it without any consultation. So it's true that you can get things done, but at what cost? And my belief is at the moment, at a time of interlocking crises, the only antidote is social cohesion and social capital, and that is built when people get together and they messily come up with a compromise. Because other than that, you've got at an extreme North Korea, but you've also got this kind of belief that what you need is an authoritarian leader that is going to just make decisions and everything's going to get better. And you still have chaos, like in America. So, I understand the allure of that kind of form of government and that kind of way forward at a time where everything seems so uncertain and we're so unhappy with our leaders. But I think again, we put a lot on a small group of people to lead us out of the problems we're in, and they have most of the power and a lot of the responsibility. But we build this from the bottom. We build this everybody here making the decisions and being leaders in their own communities. That's the way we do it. There's no other way than a messy way. The Buddhists say there's no way out but through, and that's where we have to go through to something else. And it's going to feel uncertain and difficult at times, and it's going to be hard. All good things and important things are hard. I suppose the parallel here for me from my mental health journey, and when I think about what I thought mental health was when I was 20, I thought mental health was going to a psychiatrist, we we would talk about it for an hour, and maybe they would give me, medication, and then I would go back to my life and do my life. And that I kind of had a view of mental health like it was like fixing a broken ankle. And it's not that, it's like that everyday messy working through it. Right? And in fact, that approach, that kind of idea that there was going to be a quick fix and that I could kind of compartmentalise it and it wouldn't find its way to bleed itself into the rest of my life, was a very naive view. And now I realise that actually what it is just everyday difficult stuff, everyday messy stuff. There's just no way to kind of make it do it quickly. And it's in the not doing it quickly that the strength comes.
Thank you. Next question. When you told people about the benefits of MDMA therapy, have you experienced much stigma, or was it just curiosity?
Oh yeah, it's interesting. When I say talk, just very quickly, when I say talk about the benefits, I talk about the benefits to me in a particular context. I wrote the book because I was like, okay, why did it work so well for me? At book launches and things like that, when people come up to me and say, oh, I bought some ecstasy and I'm going into the forest to deal with the fact that I don't like my father, I'm like, that's not the lesson. Do not do that, That's not the way forward. So I wouldn't say that I'm an advocate for it. I'm curious about why it worked, and I'm really interested to see how the clinical trials and how the work goes forward. So I've been absolutely shocked about, most people aren't rude to me or say things just up to my face, but I have been really interested in how people have responded. Some people have said to me, I can't believe you talked about this in public. Are you worried people won't respect your research anymore? I've had some people say things like that. I've had a lot of people say to me, your father was so wealthy and educated, I can't believe he was violent. And I'm like, oh, it's because it's only poor uneducated people are violent. Like, really quite extraordinary. Suppositions about trauma that surface. But mainly what's been very interested in those questions about shame, about do I feel ashamed? And I was like, why should I feel ashamed about this? I didn't do anything wrong. Like, my father's dead. Like, the only people who should be ashamed are the people around him who saw this stuff happening and didn't do anything because he was a very well-respected professor of law and people didn't think that that's what professors of law did. I realised that the shame was their shame. Like, they couldn't possibly imagine talking about it. But all of that stuff has been wildly outbalanced by the numbers of people who've come, who on the surface look very different to me. Different gender, different cultural background, different age. You said, I read your book and I'm really, the same thing happened to me. So that's where all the kind of, I go back to the kind of power of the Gabor Mate work, which is like the myth of normal. I really did write about this and think, everybody is going to think that I had this weird, horrible childhood and I'm going to be out there, and then everybody's going to be there looking at it. And we're all there, we are all in that. And so that was a really wonderful thing that's happened in the book. How many people have read it and identified with it and then gone on, not necessarily do the MDMA therapy, but to read more about trauma and to acknowledge it more and to talk about it more. And that's been really wonderful, outweighing all the other stuff that's come up.
Okay, one more question. I think we have time for at least one, maybe more. In times of crisis, how can we make sure no one feels left out or forgotten? And what real changes can we put in place today to protect the mental health and well-being of future generations?
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
That's all about here today.
Oh, wow. That's a very difficult. Well, look, okay, let me just look at three things, or say three things. That's such a big question. I would say that well, let me step back. I remember I read a lot of books about trauma, and I was reading a book that was talking about a particular trauma expert who had decided to focus all of his work in America just on the CEOs of big corporations. Because he said all of them, that drive to run a big corporation or the drive to be a political leader, something is driving that. And in fact, that was one of the more interesting things about the book, where I said, because the other thing people have said to me is, you're so successful, you've got all these books and you've done all these degrees, you have 3 children, and your house is perfect. And I'm like, yes. What did you think was driving that? Because a lot of it was dark, but it was socially okay. And one of the more controversial things I say is there is actually no difference between me and somebody who's addicted to heroin. I'm just addicted to cleaning and work, but it's the same thing. I just had access to education and privilege, which meant you can go down that path, but I didn't. There's no different, and at no stage should anybody say, you need to stop it. You're driving yourself into the ground for what? So I think that, anyway, to go back to this guy who works with CEOs, the level of where that drive is for the people that lead our country, I'm not saying in all cases, but in some cases, comes from a lot of unaddressed issues. So they will talk about mental health at events and all the rest of it. I don't think they really understand it. They still other it. They still think they still apply a very narrow clinical frame to it. They don't actually see it. I would like people to start to think about mental health like they think about productivity, like they think about anything that everybody has to be engaged in to make sure that we have a society that works well. So that's what I would like. At the macro level. At the micro level, one of the other things I try and say to people, and maybe this is the Italian is have people over to your house for a meal. Try and do that as much as you possibly can, and show that your children that you could do that. Don't worry that your house is messy. Don't worry that it's takeaway. I remember once doing a piece of work, a really, really big piece of work, a survey with, was like 3,000 Australian women, all of whom had children and were working. And the level of depression, alienation, I think 1 out of every 3 of those women said that they were moving through their life like they were robotic. And one part of it was like, we asked a question about, do you see your friends enough? Do you have them over? And a big chunk of them said, I can't entertain because I'm worried that they're going to judge me that my house is messy and that I'm not going to make a good meal. And I was like, we are holding ourselves back from the kinds of everyday reciprocal practices of walking with someone, of saying, okay, Friday night I'll look after your kids so you can actually go out and it's not going to cost you a bomb, and then the next one. All of those kinds of everyday moments of exchange that aren't economic. We need to do more of that instead of what we're doing, which is more of this. So that's what at a macro level, that's what I try and do. My children always complain, oh, there's people over for dinner again. And I'm like, sit at the table, talk to them. I want them to know you and for you to know them. And I want you to get off the iPads. And it's been, is it tiring to kind of do all that stuff? Yes, but what's the alternative? That we're like this and we're a society where we don't have those moments, and I want more of those moments in a society that creates the opportunity for more of those moments.
Thank you. And
6, 5.
I think we've got time for one.
Okay, one more. Yes, I'll be quick.
Even though we've got all the
just not a big question like how do we solve all the problems of society, just like a little one.
I suspect that you've already answered.
Okay.
Maybe nothing for you to say.
Okay.
What's more? I'm combining 2 questions here, which is about connection.
Yeah.
And how do you stay connected and seek out connections? And how do you give other people or help other people with those deep connections if they don't have it?
It's very difficult. And, oh wow. How do you stay connected? Is that you stay open, curious, as physically active as you can possibly be. Like if you can't physically move, you can't go out and be open to serendipitous exchanges with people in your day-to-day life, which is often just politeness. looking at somebody, saying hello, how's your day, what do you think, you really look nice in that outfit, that kind of stuff, and to model that for your children. There's a weird thing, it's interesting, a weird thing about how we've made, understandably, we've educated our kids about stranger danger. But stranger danger doesn't mean staring at the phone. It means thinking about and understanding what those cues are and what those interactions are with other people. So I think it's a daily practice, that openness. What was the second part of the question?
Well, and how do you help?
Oh yeah. So one of the things that's really, I'll give you a really interesting statistic that kind of takes us into the realm of political. I spent a lot of time doing all the research, not a lot of research for the campaign, but a lot of research for philanthropy on the Voice referendum. And, you know, it was pretty obvious that it wasn't going to get up, which was very hard, very difficult, not just for all of the campaigners that have worked on that for a long time. But there was an interesting statistic that came out after it, and it said, if you were a member of any club, it didn't matter what the club was, like it could be Little Nippers, or it could be the YMCA, or it could be, you were more likely to vote yes in the referendum than no. It wasn't a political organisation, just any organisation. And I was fascinated about that, and I think what it was is that if you are a member of an organisation, you're more likely to have a conversation about something. Somebody's like, oh, have you heard this referendum thing's happening? You know, you're actually more likely to have an interaction with another human being rather than with a device or a small, and that opens you up to thinking about it. So that sense of being part of a group that contribute, that volunteer, that come together to create something bigger, made people more likely to open themselves up to a proposition that in some ways was for a lot of people opaque and they didn't understand the impact. And you know, for me, it all goes back, and if people haven't read Bowling Alone by Professor Robert Putnam, they should look on Netflix. There is a fantastic documentary called Join or Die, which sounds very much like a slasher cult film or something else about vampires, but it isn't about that. His thesis, which is absolutely, I see it more out in my research all the time, which he said, the belief in our democratic systems and volunteerism, like as actually people being being joiners, that they're connected. The moment people started stopping joining organisations and stopping connecting, trust in institutions, because trust in institutions just tanked, and then you've got what you've got in America. And that's because how can you trust the High Court if you don't even know your neighbour? How can you trust something that feels abstract, or which you don't have any lived experience of, when you know, people that you deal with in a day-to-day basis? And trust is built through the messy interactions of every day, not edicts from afar, or not kind of from that. And that's I would love a society where it's easier to join things and be part of organisations, whatever they look like, than it is to order food online, or that's what I would like. That's what we all have to build.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Please don't go away, because there's excitement to come. So if you'd all stay in your seats for the Themes Awards ceremony, which is going to begin in just a few minutes. And I would like to welcome Natasha Mitchell, who's around here somewhere. Over here. There. Yay. I can read out that she is a multi-award winning journalist and host of the ABC Radio National flagship program.